Alright, I am back with another video, and today I'm doing the next in my Deity build lineup. This time we are doing Talos. Now, Talos is, from what I understand from what this game says, he is a chaotic, evil god of storms who basically is known for kind of being random, and most sailors, pirates, privateers, whatever you want to call them, basically kind of hope and pray that he just doesn't strike them next, because you never know where he will strike next. Is basically kind of his whole bit. A few housekeeping items before we go into this build. Number one, I am not a D&D lore expert, and I do think that most of the people who are playing Baldur's Gate 3 aren't lore experts either. So when I make these deity builds, or these chosen builds, I only go off of what this little blurb tells me down here. And this little blurb says, Talos represents the uncaring and destructive force of nature. His followers see life as a set of random effects in the sea of chaos and take what they can, for who can say when Talos will strike next? Now, perhaps I'm taking the sea of chaos thing a bit too literally and making him kind of like, making this build kind of based around the idea of being like a god of, about storms and the sea and that. But this is what I use for my builds, for these deity builds. So when I had people come into my Illustrate video and say, hey, you know, you really didn't get the lore right. For example, you know, followers of Illustrate would not actually wear armor. They'd be pretty much nude. I was like, yeah, okay, fair enough. I missed that part of the, you know, little description that the game gave me. And if you want to, you know, play a nude drow, that's perfectly fine. Just I will not be doing that so that my channel doesn't get taken down. But, so for the record, when I make these builds, yes, I could probably do some research and go further into, you know, the lore and deep, you know, lore deep dive, but I feel like that's not what this channel is about. I am just making a Baldur's Gate 3 video using the information that Baldur's Gate 3 has given me. And maybe more dialogue options would come up that I could glean more lore from, but unfortunately I don't have time to play through the whole game just to find out. So I am just going off of what this little blurb tells me and making something that I can make, that I just, I can't speak. Basically just making something that, from what I interpret from this little blurb that I'm given. So with that out of the way, let's get into the build. So, as you can probably tell from the title of this video, the Fist of Talos, we are going to be doing a monk build here. Now, the reason I've decided to go with a monk build is because there are some interesting pieces of equipment that interact with a unique status effect that I thought would be interesting for this build. Now, the way I think this character would be lore-wise is probably somewhat of a sailor, or maybe a former sailor who is now a dock worker at Baldur's Gate. Perhaps they spend a lot of time around the taverns, or maybe a lot of time out at sea. It could be a multitude of different things. And I think that this specific person, maybe they're not necessarily a, you know, a devout follower of Talos, or at least they weren't. They definitely noticed something strange about the fact that whenever he heard tales of people going out to sea and be set upon by Talos's random, you know, will, his wrath, this guy, even though he could sail into the deepest storms, he would always come out of it unscathed, and over time slowly started to think he may have been somewhat blessed by Talos with good fortune, but the reason is unknown. I'll let the person who plays this build, if they decide to decide exactly what that lore reason might be for why their character may, you know, be somewhat blessed by Talos, but I feel like we can come up with something interesting here. And basically the way the story would be is that, you know, this person was maybe working in the docks or on a boat when the Nautiloid struck, was kidnapped, and then obviously starts the game in the Nautiloid. So yeah, all things check out here. But I do imagine this character as a bit of a brawler, someone who would probably get into a lot of fights, either to fight off pirates while out on the seas, or just good old bar tavern brawls. So I feel like this character would be a monk, but not a monastic monk, more of a slugger pugilist type monk. Either way, let's get into the build because I've rambled on for way long. So, first of all, as a monk, we're going to be getting Flurry of Blows straight away, and we're going to be able to make unarmed attacks using our Dexterity modifier, and we get a 1d4 for our damage. We're also going to be getting Unarmored Defense and a few other things here, and also we're going to get our first key points so we can start using our key abilities. As for the stats, this is going to get a little bit weird as we are a little bit multi-ability score dependent with this build. So feel free to play these stat spreads a little bit differently, but I'm just going to show you what I came up with for something that I feel like is decently okay for what we're trying to do. We're going to want to put strength at 14, dexterity at 14, constitution at 14, and wisdom at 16. Let me just quickly readjust that because I did the math wrong in my head. This is a weird stat spread, I will admit. We're kind of a jack of all trades, master of none type deal here, with our wisdom being the only key outlier. This is going to give you a lot of utility that I feel is thematic. You're going to have a decent pool of health with 14, not the greatest, but decent. You're going to have a good amount of AC with an unarmored defense with 14 dex, again, not great, but decent. And we're going to have a decent amount of strength to be able to do a few important things later on, thanks to our 14 in strength, but again, not the best. Our wisdom is the standout feature here, because we're going to need it for our monk abilities, but we'll be able to use some game mechanics here to kind of tie up these stat scores. Specifically, you can get your strength to 16 using the potion of everlasting strength, which is what I recommend doing. I would also recommend bumping up your constitution to 15 using Auntie Ethel's Boon, which is then going to be bumped up to a 16 later once we get a certain feat. You can probably guess what it is. Alright, let's keep going. Next up at monk level 2, we're actually going to be dipping over straight to cleric, because I want to get us some certain cleric features right off the bat, and well, also we kind of want to be able to get our dialogue options for being a kind of follower of Talos, or someone who is, in this case, at least aware of his existence. So we're going to be looking at, let's look at our cantrips first. We're going to be taking the 3 kind of conversation or just dialogue cantrips for cleric, as I like to call them. Thaumaturgy for advantage on intimidation and performance, guidance for a 1d4 bonus to all ability checks, and resistance for a 1d4 bonus to saving throws. So probably not really a dialogue one, but you get the point. This is a good pillar of stuff to have, especially since we're not really going to be casting Sacred Flame at all if we went with that, or even Produce Flame, so these are just all quite useful to have. And if this wasn't obvious, we're going with the Tempest domain. Obviously, this is basically Talos' domain. It only makes sense to go with this, and it's going to give us some nice features and synergies with Monk. First up, we're going to be getting Thunder Wave and Fog Cloud added to our spell list for free, very, very on theme. And we're also going to be getting Wrath of the Storm. As a reaction, strike back against an attacking creature, dealing 2d8 lightning damage, my apologies, or 2d8 thunder damage, and with the target taking half damage on a successful saving throw. Basically, you choose the damage type, and then you spend your reaction, and they have to make a saving throw. So this is a really, really awesome feature. Basically, just for the cost of your reaction, you're going to always be dealing extra damage to people who are, you know, attacking you. So this is quite useful to have, and the fact that we can do lightning or thunder is going to synergize with some features we're going to get later. Obviously, our deity is Talos, as I said before, and we're also going to get some spells at this level. Unfortunately, the kind of basic cleric spells aren't really on theme for this build, but you're definitely going to need to take Create or Destroy Water. This is going to be essential for the build for some setups we're going to get into later. If you've played a Tempest Cleric, you know exactly what I'm about to do, but hey-ho, let's play with the mystery a little longer for those who don't know. Also, we're going to pick up Sanctuary here just because it's a really useful spell. Command can be used to do some interesting things and get you some interesting equipment throughout the game if you want to go that route. And something like Shield of Faith or Bless. None of these spells really matter, but you definitely want the utility options. Shield of Faith is a good spell for the early game to give you an extra buff to your AC for only your concentration. Pretty good. Now, I am going to go quickly into Cleric level 2 just so we get one of our key features. We're going to basically be grabbing our first subclass feature, our Channel Divinity feature, which is Destructive Wrath. When you roll a Thunder or Lightning damage, well, when you roll Thunder or Lightning damage, you can use your Channel Divinity to deal the maximum damage instead. For those of you that know the classic Tempest Cleric Storm Sorcerer combo, this is an extremely powerful feature. We're not going to be getting the maximum possible damage out of it on this build, but later on when we get into some of the more destructive ways of dealing lightning damage, this is going to come in handy quite a lot, so it's worth getting it now. We also get Turn Undead here, but it's not really on theme or really interesting for this build, so let's move on. You also get an extra spell or something at this level, I think. Take whatever. Next up, I want to jump back over to Monk, because I don't really want to delay our Monk features for too much longer. So let's take a look at what we get. We're going to be getting unarmored movement, so we're going to be able to move faster while not wearing armor, which we're not. You're also going to be getting patient defense to make it so that attack rolls have disadvantage against you, and you can also dash and disengage as a bonus action. Next up at Monk level 3, we're going to be getting our subclass, and this is kind of up to you. I think that if you wanted to go more of a pure melee route, Way of the Open Hand will still do fine. However, I think if we want to be more thematic and get some really useful utility options that are going to synergize with our equipment and our cleric features, Way of the Four Elements is definitely the way to go. We're going to get Harmony of Fire and Water. While not in combat, you can regain your key points. You can regain half your key points rounded down. I believe this is once per long rest. It doesn't actually say here, but I believe it's once per long rest. And as for Disciple of the Elements, we're going to get 3 spells. Now, I can see you going a bunch of different ways with this. Obviously, you could go Touch of the Storm. I don't personally recommend this, though, as it's not very powerful, and we're not going to be getting to the level with it where it would scale up to 2d10. So I think you could just leave this one behind. We're going to have better ways of dealing lightning damage. Speaking of better ways of dealing lightning damage, the Sphere of Elemental Balance is one of those pieces of utility that is going to be essential to this build. This is the same as the Chromatic Orb spell, except it only takes key points. So essentially you pick a type of damage, and you can choose either Thunder or Lightning, and if you choose Thunder, you just do a big amount of damage, 3d8, but if you choose Lightning, you do 2d8, but you also create a lightning surface. That is extremely important for some things that we're going to be able to get into later. As for your other spells, you can take whatever you like. You could go for Fist of the Four Thunders. It does 2d8 thunder damage and pushes targets away unless they succeed a con save. Very on theme. You could also do Fist of the Unbroken Air, which pushes the target back 6 meters and knocks it prone, and it's like a big fist of rushing air. I quite like this thematically, because I feel like with a Tempest God, yes, you do thunder and lightning damage, but you would also, have, like, I can't speak today. I apologize if this is a bit rambly. But basically, if you go with like a Tempest God, they could also manipulate, strong winds. So the Fist of Unbroken Air makes sense, and also water, which is why I'm also going to suggest Water Whip. Whereas Fist of the Unbroken Air can push things away from you, Water Whip can bring them closer to you, and both can also knock their enemies prone, which obviously gives a big advantage to you and your team. So I feel like Sphere of Elemental Balance, Fist of Unbroken Air, and Water Whip are definitely some of the better utility options you can go for. Obviously, Fangs of the Fire Snake is a powerful option if you wanted to kind of step out of the realms of what might be thematically appropriate and get something that's just more powerful, but I really like these 3 options for what they give us. At Monk level 4, we're going to be getting our first feat, and if it wasn't obvious, we're going to be grabbing Tavern Brawler. Now, because of the way our stats are kind of spread out, we're going to want to be bumping our Constitution here to 15, and as I said before, if you took Ethel's Boon, this is going to bump it up to a 16. Like I say, I don't really want to increase strength here, because you're going to be using Everlasting Potion to bump that up to 16. And obviously with Tavern Brawler, the strength modifier is added twice to our attack and damage rolls with unarmed attacks, improvised weapons, or throwing. So basically our unarmed strikes are going to be doing a ton of damage with this build, because we're going to be able to apply our strength modifier on top of our dexterity modifier to our attacks. And again, once our strength and dex are both at 16, as they will be by the end of this build, this is going to do a decent chunk of damage with each unarmed strike, stacking with our equipment to do even more. So you want to take Tavern Brawler at this level and pick up Constitution as your half ASI. Ability score improvement. At Monk level 5, we're going to be getting one of our more important features, Extra Attack. Now, if you don't care about the early Cleric levels, you could go straight to here first and get this a bit quicker, or you could just take the 1-level Cleric if you want those dialogue options and save Destructive Wrath for later. But you definitely want to get Extra Attack as early as you reasonably can, because obviously it's an extremely important feature of the build for DPS reasons. You also get Stunning Strike, but as I always say, it's kind of met in this game, so I'm not too worried about it. And finally, at Monk level 6. Now, this level of Monk is kind of optional. What you're going to be getting here is the Disciple of the Elements spell. You get another one, and you can also pick from kind of like the second tier of spells. However, the only one of these spells that I would consider thematically appropriate is Gong of the Summit, which does 3d8 thunder damage. However, Sphere of Elemental Balance also does 3d8 thunder damage if you so choose, and this one costs more key points to use. The difference being that it damages all nearby creatures and objects, and for creatures made of inorganic material, such as stone or metal, have disadvantage on their saving throws, but honestly, 3 key points for something that we can just get for 2 key points feels a little bit weird. Take it if you want, but honestly, I can see you taking something like Clench of the North Wind for Hold Person. Fist of the Four Thunders to push people away, Rush of the Gale Spirits to knock creatures off balance and push away clouds of darkness or poison, or even Cloud Kill in some situations. Even ice spells would be thematic here. The Blade of Rime, making an icy surface like a chilly wind, could definitely be interesting. I will take Gong the Summit here just because I will just showcase its difference the difference between it and Sphere of Elemental Balance towards the end here, because I'm going to show off kind of your combination like moves at the end of this build. But I definitely think that you could pick something else and probably get a little bit more mileage, or ditch this level altogether. However, I do feel like you need to go with this level if you want your unarmed strikes to be up to par, because this is the point where they would bump up from 1d4 to 1d6. So you're probably going to want to be taking this level of monk either way, even if the level of spells, the spells that you get can be a bit eh. But that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me, as a lot of you do. That sounded bad. No, I do appreciate you guys correcting me. That sounded off. Oh, I'm all over the place for this video today. It's because I wasn't expecting to make one today, but here we are. Now that we've finally hit our kind of 6th level of Monk, I want to go back to Cleric and stay there. So at level 3 Cleric, we're going to get some things. We do get Shatter here as a deity spell. However, I don't mind having Shatter as both a spell and a monk action, or, you know, similar spells as both monks and as both a monk action and a spell as a cleric, because we're using 2 separate resources, which basically just means we get more use out of it. So yeah, like I say, if you don't want to take Gong on the Summit, you really don't have to, because you're going to get it in a different way here. We're also going to get Gust of Wind as well, so, you know, lots of overlap with these 2 classes, but hey-ho, like I say, using different resources just means you're going to get to use it more often. As for your prepared spells, we are now onto level 2 spells, and I would highly recommend picking up Aid, because it is one of the most powerful spells in the game. You're going to be able to buff your whole team and yourself for extra tankiness with higher maximum HP. I would also recommend getting something like Hold Person, just because it is a powerful spell. You could have also picked this as your monk action if you want. Spiritual Weapon is kind of cool. It is going to basically give you a non-concentration extra ally. Basically, it's just more DPS overall. I don't know why I keep saying DPS. That's a bad way of phrasing things in a game like this. And I would just keep, you know, the typical level 1 spells as well. DPS is wrong. It should be damage per round, DPR. I keep saying DPS. It's because it's in my language. As for cantrips, you can take whatever you like here. Maybe finally pick up Sacred Flame, or if you want a bit more tankiness, you can pick up Blade Ward. As for your prepared spells, you get 1 extra. Nothing really changes here. Just take whatever you like. And we're also going to get another feat at this level. I'm going to recommend you bump your dexterity up by 2 here. You could bump up your wisdom. Wisdom, oh my god, even that word's kind of made it into my lexicon. You could bump up your wisdom here to increase your spell DC on your monk actions and your cleric spells, or you could bump up your dexterity like I am here to get higher attack, higher AC, or also higher attack as well, I suppose. But honestly, it's kind of up to you. If you don't care so much about your AC and you don't mind your strength being the one that kind of gets used for your unarmed strikes, you could definitely bump up your wisdom. It's entirely up to you. More AC from Dex, better spells from wisdom. I wouldn't bother. Or you could even, I guess, since our strength would be 16 at this point, you could bump that up to an 18 total and get a ton more damage out of your unarmed strikes. There's a lot of different ways you can go at this, and actually, I think now that I've thought about it and said it out loud, I'm going to make our wisdom higher, since our high strength is going to be giving us, you know, the same amount of damage either way. Dexterity would only affect our AC, and we're going to have some ways to bump our AC with our equipment in a minute, so it's not the end of the world. I think actually bumping wisdom here might be the better way to go. Yes, leaving Constitution at 15 is a little bit awkward, but like I say, you're going to use Ethel's Boon to bump that up to 16 anyway, so it's not a big deal. I think actually bumping up our wisdom here is a good show. Next up at Cleric level 5, we're going to be getting our level 3 spells, and we're also going to be getting some spells from our subclass, including Cool Lightning, a big buff to our lightning output. This is a huge spell, and it's on theme, summoning thunder from the heavens as if Talos sent it down himself. Very, very cool. We're also going to get Sleet Storm here, allowing us to call forth a storm that disrupts the concentration of spellcasters, douses fires, and creates ice surfaces. Probably not going to be using this one that much, but it might come up in some unique situations. As for your prepared spells, like I say, we do get level 3 spells at this point, and obviously Spirit Guardians, while not necessarily being on theme, is a great spell to pick up overall. Glyph of Warding, you can create thunder and lightning traps with this, so I would actually pick it up because it can be on theme. And the last spell can be whatever you like, it really doesn't matter. Take Revivify if you want to be able to revive allies, Speak with Dead if you want that little bit of extra, you know, utility and dialogue. It's entirely up to you, really doesn't matter. You can even take Protection from Energy to grant yourself resistance to fire, thunder, or lightning, although we are going to be getting that at the next level of Cleric anyway, so it's whatever. Again, it really is a choose your favorite type of situation, pick what you like. Next up, finally, we are at Cleric level 6, and we're going to be getting a second use of our Channel Divinity, meaning we can use Destructive Wrath twice. And also Thunderbolt Strike. When you deal lightning or thunder damage to a creature that is large or smaller, you can push it up to 3 meters. Not the best feature in the world, but it's nice just for a little bit of extra utility. And you can also take an extra spell, take whatever you like. And that is the build. Overall, what we're getting here is a lot of ways to deal heavy lightning damage, or thunder damage if that's your persuasion, with a lot of battlefield control options to move your enemies around the battlefield, either pulling them towards you or pushing them away, and still being able to do high amounts of damage with our unarmed strikes. Like I say, if we had 16, it may look a bit weak here, but with the 16 strength, you would be dealing a lot more damage overall, and with the Tavern Brawl feat kicking in, and also the ability to use improvised weapons and throw things with a bit more power is always good, and having Flurry of Blows just to keep up that melee damage is awesome. As far as this build is compared to my other builds, this probably will feel a bit underpowered compared to those builds, and that's because it is a little bit. Our ability scores are a bit all over the place, but I really liked this build when I kind of got into the theming of it, and when we get into the equipment, as we'll do in a minute, you'll see why I made the decisions I did. First up, let's get into what the main crux of this build is, and that is lightning charges. For those of you that don't know, I'll bring it up here. No, apparently I can't bring it up here. Yeah, I can bring it up here. So what lightning charges do, lightning courses through you. You have a +1 to attack rolls and deal an additional 1 lightning damage. If you gain 5 charges, they are consumed the next time you deal damage, and you deal an additional 1d8 lightning damage. You lose 1 charge per turn. So, the equipment we have equipped here is basically going to build up these lightning charges in various different ways, and again, those lightning charges are going to be able to augment our melee and spell attacks with lightning damage, additional lightning damage, meaning that can also trigger our Tempest Cleric features, and just allow us to have a bunch of battlefield control and utility. So let's get into it. First up, we have the Haste Helm. This is just an easy helm to pick up in Act 1, but it's going to give you momentum at the start of combat for 3 turns, which just gives you a bit of extra movement speed. I just picked this because it's an easy option to grab in Act 1. There is a headpiece that interacts with lightning charges, but it only gives you temporary HP and a very small amount of it at that, only 3, so I didn't really feel like it was worth it. And the Haste Helm is a bit easier to get quite early on and just gives you a little bit more movement to be able to quickly close in on your enemies, but this can be changed for literally anything you find useful. Next up is our chest piece to protect the Spark Wall. You gain a +1 bonus to spell save DC, and you also get Spark's Wall armor. The wearer has a +1 bonus to armor class and saving throws as long as they have lightning charges. With this build, you're going to have lightning charges up pretty much 100% of the time during combat, so this is just an extra bit of defense that is also on theme. But I will also show off the Jolty Vest. This is a piece of medium armor that has superior material, meaning it takes 1 less slashing damage, and it has counter shock. When the wearer takes damage while having lightning charges, the attacker must succeed a dexterity saving throw or become shocked. Now, what shock does is the opponent cannot take reactions and has disadvantage on ability checks and saving throws using dexterity. So overall, this could be a more powerful option if you're getting melee attacked a lot, basically allowing that you're basically taking away the ability for your opponent to use reactions, my apologies. And with the amount of dexterity that we have, you are getting the same amount of AC either way, so pick your poison here, but do note that if you are using medium armor, you're not going to be able to get things like unarmored movement, but I figured I'd show it off here just in case. Next up, the Sparkle Hands, a key part of this build. On a hit with an unarmed attack, the wearer gains 2 lightning charges. So, for example, if you do your unarmed attack and then your extra bonus action unarmed attack, you will immediately get 4 lightning charges, which is huge. Flurry of Blows can give you 2 as well. You get a lot from this. While imbued with lightning charges, the attacks against metal constructs and foes wearing metal armor gain advantage. Especially towards the late game, there are a lot of foes that are going to be wearing metal armor, and obviously when you get to Act 3 there are a lot of metal constructs, so these can come in super handy and is definitely the most effective way to build lightning charges as a monk. Awesome, worth grabbing, and these are all of these are attainable in Act 1, by the way. We're doing quite well here. Next up, the water sparkers. When the wearer stands in water during combat, it becomes electrified. Basically, that means when we use create or destroy water, or throw a water bottle, or whatever we want to do, just merely stepping into that puddle of water is going to electrify the surface, triggering a few of our abilities, and also causing a lot of trouble for your foes. Obviously, standing in electrified surfaces is not good for your health. Also, when we stand on said electrified surface, they gain 3 lightning charges. So you can use Create or Destroy Water to create a lightning surface with these boots, or you can use the Sphere of Elemental Balance, the lightning variant, to do the same thing, and you will be able to gain lightning charges either way, and this gains 3 lightning charges. So with the combination of the Sparkle Hands and the Water Sparkers, you will be able to get pretty much the maximum amount of lightning charges really quick, constantly getting that extra D8 of lightning damage. Very, very, very cool combo. All of these can be obtained fairly early on, so it's an easy combo to get started with right away, which is kind of why we took those early levels of Monk. Next up, our amulet, we'll get to that first, this is mainly just kind of showing off something cool for monks. There is a side quest tied to this amulet. Basically, you get a lesser version of this that houses a chaotic spirit, which kind of works with the Talos theming, being chaotic. And there's a whole subquest revolving around that where you can kind of talk to the amulet. It's going to give you Shatter once per long rest for free, cast as a level 2 spell, so it's a little bit more powerful. And also you're going to be able to use Key Restoration. Now, I believe the lesser version restores 2 key points, but this version restores key points equal to your martial arts die. You can get the lesser version of this amulet in Act 1 as well, so this whole build comes online during Act 1, very, very early on, so it's quite good. Next up is the Sparks Wall. This basically makes you resistant to being electrocuted and grants resistance to lightning damage, very much on theme. Essentially, this is good because, obviously, if we're playing around with electric surfaces, we don't want to ourselves be electrocuted. So getting both an immunity to electrocution, which I'll show you what that does. It basically deals 1d4 lightning damage at the start of each turn. That's what we'll be doing to our enemies. We don't want that to happen to ourselves, so this is good. Also, giving us resistance to lightning damage is a bonus and is very on theme. Next up, the Shadow Cloaked Ring. The wearer's weapons and unarmed attacks deal an additional 1d4 damage against lightly or heavily obscured creatures and creatures made of shadow. This is not essential to the build. Put whatever you like in here, it really doesn't matter. I just wanted to show off that this ring can kind of buff up our unarmed strikes a little bit in niche situations. It's not essential, but it's worth pointing out that it exists. So let's get into the... we also have the Darkfire Shortbow for resistance to fire, cold, and the ability to cast haste once per long rest because, you know, free slot, might as well use it. Let me get into quickly the weapons, the items that I didn't use that work with lightning charges and why I didn't go with them. This is the Blast Pendant. It gives you the Lightning Blast action. Focus the electricity in your veins to strengthen your next lightning spell or cantrip. Basically what this does is it will expend all of your, basically once per long rest, it will expend all of your lightning charges when you cast a lightning spell, and will deal an extra 1 point of damage per lightning charge. Obviously, this is bad. You don't want to be spending all of your lightning charges at once like that if you can help it. And you actually get less damage overall than just letting lightning charges do their 1d8 of damage. It doesn't feel great to use, and again, it's only once per long rest. You're going to get more utility out of the Sentient Amulet overall, but this does exist if you want to use it. I already went over the Jolty Vest. And we have the Speedy Light Feat. When the wearer dashes or takes a similar action during combat, they gain 3 lightning charges, and also you get a small bump to athletics. Technically, this is a bit more accessible than the water sparklers if you don't want to mess around with the kind of water feature, but I really recommend that you do. Using water also makes your foes wet, meaning they are vulnerable to lightning damage, so you definitely want to be using Create or Destroy Water. But these can be a different option if you don't have access to that kind of playstyle yet. If you maybe went with the monk levels before even taking any cleric levels, this also works, but do note that this is medium armor, so it isn't going to work with your unarmored defense, whereas the water sparklers are just clothing. There's also over here these are just the leftovers from my Thor build. This is just more kind of synergistic equipment. Please go ahead and watch my Fallen Thunder God video if you want more detail about these. But I will just quickly point out for Null Runa is a pretty powerful weapon that you can get here. And because we took a level of Tempest Cleric, we can use it, we will be proficient, and will work as a monk weapon. Basically, this could replace your unarmed strikes later on in the game once you reach Act 3 if you wanted to go with like a God of the Seas type of weapon, which I do think is on theme. This weapon will return to your hand when thrown, and you cannot be forced to drop it. When thrown, the weapon creates an explosion that deals thunder damage, and also you gain more movement speed and jump distance. The weapon can glow, which you can turn off, and it's a +3 enchantment, and it also does 1d6 thunder damage on hit as well as an additional bit of piercing damage. If you feel like by the time you reach Act 3 that your unarmed strikes are underwhelming, pick this up and make it your monk weapon, being able to mix this with your unarmed strikes. But yeah, that is everything, I believe. Like I said, this is probably not the most powerful build I've made, but it's definitely on theme, and I definitely wanted to do something a little bit different for, you know, this god, because obviously I feel like 90% of people, when they think of, you know, Talos and the Tempest domain, they just think, oh yeah, 2 levels of Tempest Cleric and go the rest Storm Sorcerer, and, you know, just blast everything with lightning, and that is one of the more powerful strategies in the game. Colby D4 went over it in one of his Baldur's Gate 3 build videos, so all credit goes to him for that for putting this idea in my head. But when I saw the fact that we could use the sparkly hands to give ourselves lightning damage and could mix that with the features of Tempest Cleric and 4 Elements Monk, I wanted to show off a alternative version of this. Yes, it is probably not the most optimized thing in the world, but overall I do think it is quite fun, it has a decent amount of utility, and is overall quite interesting thematically and a bit different. But of course, if it's not your cup of tea, I understand, and again, it's not the most powerful option out there for this type of build. I would definitely watch, you know, D4's build on his Tempest Cleric Sorcerer mix if you want to get some decent mileage out of this concept. But I'm not going to just copy his idea here, because that would be lame as fuck. But yeah, that is going to do it for me. I hope you enjoyed this build regardless, and I will see you all next time.